The text arrived at 7:43 p.m., just as Marcus was cutting the first slice of my elaborate 3-tier birthday cake. "Don't eat the cake," from Aunt Helena, the woman who had raised me after my parents died. The one person who knew all my secrets. Except this one, that I'd been planning my husband's destruction for the past 18 months. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice water as the party continued around me. 23 guests laughed and chatted in our perfectly appointed living room, completely unaware that their host had just received what could only be interpreted as a warning. The cake sat there like an accusation, its pristine white fondant, gleaming under the crystal chandelier Marcus had insisted we buy with my inheritance money. "Everything all right, darling?" Marcus appeared at my elbow, his perfectly veneered smile as fake as everything else about our marriage. His hand found the small of my back, a gesture that once made me feel protected, but now felt possessive, controlling. Helena texting birthday wishes? I forced a laugh, sliding my phone into my clutch. You know Aunt Helena, always dramatic about something. But my mind was racing. Helena lived 3 states away and hadn't spoken to Marcus directly in over 2 years. Not since their carefully polite conversation at our wedding had revealed their mutual distaste. She had no way of knowing about tonight's party unless someone had told her. Or unless she knew something I didn't. Marcus guided me back toward our guests, his fingers pressing slightly too hard against my spine. "Come on, birthday girl, let's not keep everyone waiting for cake." His voice carried that underlying edge I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant I was supposed to comply immediately and without question. The crowd gathered around the dining room table, faces eager and expectant. I recognized most of them, Marcus's colleagues from the law firm, a few of his college friends, some neighbors. My own friends had been gradually phased out over the 3 years of our marriage, their invitations becoming less frequent, their calls returning later and later until they stopped coming at all, another red flag I'd ignored until it was too late. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Marcus announced, lighting the candles with theatrical flair. He was in his element, the perfect host, the devoted husband. The performance that had fooled everyone, including me, until I'd discovered the truth about who Marcus Whitmore really was. I closed my eyes, feeling 23 pairs of expectant gazes. The wish that came to mind wasn't about birthdays or happiness or any of the normal things people wished for. It was darker, more specific, and it had been the same wish for 18 months. That Marcus would pay for what he'd done. That he would lose everything, just as I had when I'd trusted him with my heart, my inheritance, and my future. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The candles flickered out to enthusiastic applause. Marcus raised his champagne glass, Dom Perignon, bought with money from the trust fund my parents had established before their car accident when I was 16. "To my beautiful wife Sophia," he announced, his lawyer's voice carrying easily through the room. 28 years old today, and more radiant than ever. I smiled and nodded, playing my role perfectly while my phone buzzed again in my clutch. Helena, undoubtedly. The woman who had single-handedly managed my trust fund through my teenage years, who had taught me about investments and financial responsibility, who had warned me that Marcus might not be what he seemed. The woman I'd ignored because I was 25 and in love and convinced I knew better. Marcus began serving the cake, his movements precise and practiced. He'd insisted on doing the honors himself, claiming he wanted everything to be perfect for my special day. Each slice was identical, carefully portioned, beautiful to look at. Just like everything else in our marriage. Perfect on the surface, rotten underneath. "This looks absolutely divine," gushed Patricia Chen from Marcus's office, accepting her plate with an admiring glance at the elaborate sugar flowers adorning each piece. "You must give me the name of your baker," Marcus arranged. "Everything," I replied, my voice steady despite the growing unease in my chest. "He has such wonderful taste." The lie came easily now, after years of crediting him with achievements that weren't his, hiding my own accomplishments to make him feel more successful, pretending his controlling behavior was actually attentiveness. But, as I watched him serve each guest, something nagged at me. The way he avoided looking directly at me as he worked. The slight tremor in his hands that I might have missed if I hadn't been studying him so intently. The fact that he'd insisted on handling every detail of tonight's party himself, down to ordering the cake from a bakery I'd never heard of, in a town 40 minutes away. My phone buzzed a third time. Aunt Helena never texted more than once unless it was an emergency. "Excuse me," I murmured to the room, stepping into the kitchen under the pretense of getting more napkins. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. "Sophia, do not eat that cake. Something is wrong. Call me now." The capital letters made my blood freeze. Helena was many things: dramatic, opinionated, fiercely protective. But she never resorted to all caps unless she was genuinely terrified. I glanced back toward the dining room, where Marcus was still playing the perfect host, ensuring everyone had their slice before taking one for himself. I dialed her number with trembling fingers. "Sophie, thank God." Helena's voice was tight with tension. "Listen to me very carefully. I need you to get out of that house right now." "What are you talking about?" I whispered, pressing myself against the kitchen counter. "It's my birthday party. There are 20 people here." "That's what he's counting on," she said grimly. "Sophie, I've been investigating Marcus for the past 6 months. The things I've found. We need to talk, but not now, not there. Just trust me and get out." The room spun slightly. "You've been investigating my husband? Your husband who cleaned out your trust fund. Your husband who's been forging your signature on legal documents. Your husband who took out $1 million life insurance policy on you 6 months ago." Helena's words hit like physical blows. "Sophie, Marcus isn't who you think he is. His real name is Martin Winchester, and you're not his first wife." I gripped the counter harder, my knees threatening to give out. Through the doorway, I could see Marcus laughing at something Patricia had said, his perfect smile never faltering. But his eyes kept darting toward the kitchen, watching for my return. "You're his fourth," Helena continued relentlessly. "The first 3 are all dead, Sophie. Accidents, they called them. Convenient accidents that made Martin very, very wealthy." "That's impossible," I breathed. But even as I said it, pieces were clicking into place. The way Marcus had pushed for a quick wedding, his insistence on managing my finances, the life insurance policy he'd claimed was just responsible planning, the gradual isolation from my friends and support system, the way he'd convinced me to sell my parents' house and move into this one, which was somehow titled only in his name despite being purchased with my money. The cake, Sophie? The bakery he ordered from? It doesn't exist. I drove out there this afternoon after I tracked down the order. The address is a vacant lot. But I found the real bakery, or rather, I found the woman who baked that cake. She's been asking questions, Sophie, about allergies, about medical conditions, about how to mask certain tastes. The phone nearly slipped from my sweating palm. "Are you saying he's trying to—" "I'm saying get out of that house right now. Make an excuse, any excuse, but do not eat that cake, and do not let him know you're suspicious." Through the doorway, I watched Marcus finally take a bite of his own slice, then pause, his face twisting slightly. He reached for his water glass, drinking deeply, then set the plate aside as if he'd lost his appetite. The movement was subtle, practiced, like he'd done this before. "Sophie? Are you there?" "I'm here," I whispered, my mind racing. "Helena, I need you to know something. I've been planning to leave him. I found evidence that he's been stealing from me, and I've been gathering proof. There was a pause. What kind of proof? Financial records, recorded conversations. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago. The irony wasn't lost on me that we'd both been investigating Marcus simultaneously. I was going to file for divorce next week and have him arrested for embezzlement. Sophie, listen to me very carefully. If what I suspect is true, if that cake is poisoned, he's not planning on you living long enough to divorce him. You need to get out now, and you need to call Detective Sarah Morrison at the state police. I've already briefed her on what I've found. Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, his smile firmly in place but his eyes cold. Everything okay, darling? You've been gone quite a while. Your guests are asking about you. I forced a bright smile, sliding the phone behind my back. Just checking on the ice cream. I wanted to make sure it was soft enough to serve with the cake. Oh, I don't think we need ice cream, Marcus said smoothly, stepping into the kitchen. The cake is rich enough on its own. Come on back, sweetheart. Everyone's waiting to hear your birthday speech. My birthday speech. The tradition he'd insisted on for the past 3 years, where I would thank him publicly for his love and support, cementing his image as the perfect husband in front of witnesses. Tonight, it would serve a different purpose. It would be my performance of innocence while I figured out how to get out of this alive. Of course, I said, slipping my phone back into my clutch. Just let me powder my nose first. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, but his smile never wavered. Don't be too long. We wouldn't want the cake to get stale. As I walked past him toward the powder room, I caught a scent I hadn't noticed before. Bitter almonds. So faint it was almost imperceptible. My blood turned to ice. Even someone with only basic knowledge of poisons knew what bitter almonds meant. The powder room. I locked the door with shaking hands and immediately called Detective Morrison. Detective Morrison, this is Sophia Whitmore. Helena Chen told me to call you. Mrs. Whitmore, thank God. Are you safe? Are you still in the house? Yes. But there are 23 people here. I can't just run without causing a scene that might put them in danger too. Listen carefully. We need you to stall. Do not eat anything. Do not let anyone else eat the cake if you can help it. And keep acting normal. We have units en route. But they're 20 minutes out. 20 minutes felt like a lifetime. Detective, what if someone already ate the cake? From what your aunt told me, the poison, if there is poison, would be slow-acting, designed to look like a heart attack or allergic reaction. You have time, but not much. I hung up and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was someone I barely recognized, pale, frightened, but with a steel in her eyes that hadn't been there an hour ago. For 18 months, I'd been planning Marcus's downfall through legal channels, gathering evidence of his financial crimes, preparing to destroy him in court. Now I realized he'd been planning something far worse. A knock on the door made me jump. Sophie, you okay in there? Marcus's voice, concerned and loving for the benefit of any guests who might be listening. Just a moment, I called back, quickly touching up my lipstick to buy time. My hands were steadier now, my mind focusing with the clarity that comes with real danger. If Marcus thought he could murder me in front of a room full of witnesses and get away with it, he was about to learn that Sophia Chen Whitmore was not as naive as his previous wives. I opened the door to find him standing there with my slice of cake on a small plate, fork in hand. I thought you might want this, he said, his smile warm and concerned. You looked a little pale when you left. Low blood sugar, maybe? This should help. The cake sat there between us like a test. Around us, the party continued. Laughter from the living room, the clink of champagne glasses, Patricia Chen telling someone about her latest case. Normal sounds of a normal birthday party, while my husband offered me what I now knew was my own death sentence. That's so thoughtful, I said, accepting the plate. But you know what? I think I'm too excited to eat right now. All these wonderful people, all this attention. I'm practically buzzing with adrenaline. Marcus's smile flickered for just a moment. Come on, birthday girl. Just one bite? I picked this bakery specially. The woman assured me it was exactly what I was looking for. The words sent chills down my spine. Exactly what he was looking for. Not what I would enjoy. Not what would taste good. What he was looking for. In just a moment, I said, moving past him toward the living room. I want to give my speech first, while everyone's attention is focused. I walked back into the party, Marcus close behind me, the plate of cake still in my hands. My guests looked up expectantly, their own slices half finished or barely touched. I noticed with growing horror that several people looked slightly uncomfortable. Flushed faces, someone loosening their tie, Patricia Chen reaching for her water glass repeatedly. The poison was already working in some of them. Everyone, I called out, raising my voice to carry over the conversation. Before I give my birthday speech, I have something important to share. The room fell quiet, all eyes on me. Marcus moved to stand beside me, his hand finding my waist in what looked like a supportive gesture but felt like a cage. This has been such a wonderful evening, I began, looking around at the faces of people I barely knew, people who were here because Marcus had invited them, not because they cared about me. Looking at all of you, I'm reminded that the most important thing in life is knowing who you can really trust. Marcus's fingers tightened on my waist. And I've learned something very important recently, I continued, my voice growing stronger. Sometimes the person you trust most, the person you've given your heart and your life to, isn't who they appear to be at all. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Patricia Chen was now definitely struggling, one hand pressed to her chest. Sophie, Marcus said quietly, warning clear in his voice. Maybe we should save the deep thoughts for later. But I was done taking orders from him. Done being the obedient wife, the perfect victim. If he wanted to play games with poison and life insurance policies, he was about to discover that I'd learned a few things about games myself over the past 18 months. Actually, I said, turning to face him directly, I think now is the perfect time. I raised the plate of cake, meeting his eyes with a smile as cold as his own. After all, Marcus, you've put so much effort into making this evening special. The least I can do is make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man my husband really is. The room held its breath, sensing that something had shifted, that the polite facade of the evening was about to crack wide open. Marcus's face went through a series of micro-expressions, surprise, anger, calculation, before settling back into his practiced charm. Darling, you're making our guests uncomfortable, he said with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Am I? I looked around the room again, noting the increasing signs of distress. Or are they uncomfortable for an entirely different reason? That's when Patricia Chen collapsed. The sound Patricia made as she hit the hardwood floor, a wet, choking gasp, cut through the party chatter like a blade. For a moment, everyone froze in that terrible space between normalcy and crisis, champagne glasses suspended halfway to lips, conversations dying mid-sentence. Then chaos erupted. Call 911, someone shouted. Marcus was already moving, his medical training from law school kicking in as he knelt beside Patricia's convulsing form. But I caught something in his expression before he schooled his features into concern. A flicker of calculation, as if he were mentally adjusting his timeline. Everyone stay back, he commanded, his voice taking on the authority that had attracted me to him in the first place. Give her some air. He looked up at me, and I saw it clearly now, the cold intelligence behind his warm brown eyes. Sophie, call an ambulance. Patricia's having some kind of allergic reaction. Allergic reaction. The perfect cover story, just as Helena had warned me. I pulled out my phone, but instead of dialing 911, I sent a quick text to Detective Morrison. Guest. Down. Possible poisoning. How long until backup? The response came immediately. 15 minutes. Keep everyone calm. 15 minutes might as well have been 15 hours. Around me, other guests were beginning to show symptoms. David, from Marcus's firm, was loosening his collar and breathing heavily. Mrs. Henderson, from down the street, was gripping her chair with white knuckles, and young Tommy Rodriguez was asking his wife if she felt dizzy. I counted quickly. 8 people showing distress out of 23 who had eaten the cake. Marcus had been careful with his dosing, enough to create casualties that would mask my death, but not so much that it would be immediately obvious as mass poisoning, brilliant and terrifying in its calculation. The ambulance is on the way, I announced, pocketing my phone. Is there anything else we can do for her? Marcus was checking Patricia's pulse, his face a mask of professional concern. Her heartbeat is irregular. Sophie, do we have any Benadryl? If this is an allergic reaction, antihistamines might help. I almost admired the performance. He was playing the role of the concerned host perfectly, trying to help the victims of his own crime. But I'd had 18 months to study Marcus Whitmore, to learn the tells that betrayed his lies. The way his left eye twitched slightly when he was calculating. The way his fingers drummed against his thigh when he was improvising. The way he touched his wedding ring when he was about to manipulate someone. He was doing all 3 now. I'll check the medicine cabinet, I said. But as I turned to leave, Marcus caught my wrist. Take your cake with you, he said quietly, pressing the plate back into my hands. You haven't had a single bite, and Patricia's situation has nothing to do with the cake. Don't let this ruin your birthday. His grip on my wrist was firm enough to bruise. A reminder of who held the physical power in this relationship, despite my recent discoveries about his financial crimes. But there was something else in his touch. Desperation. He needed me to eat that cake, needed his plan to work exactly as designed. Of course, I said, taking the plate with a smile. You're right. Patricia probably has a shellfish allergy or something. I'll just go get that Benadryl. I walked toward the bathroom, acutely aware of Marcus watching my every step. In the hallway mirror, I caught sight of my reflection. The perfect wife in her designer dress, carrying her birthday cake like a normal person at a normal party. Only the white knuckles gripping the plate betrayed the truth. In the bathroom, I carefully scraped a small portion of the cake into a prescription bottle I found in the medicine cabinet, then flushed the rest down the toilet. If Detective Morrison needed evidence, she would have it. If I was wrong about the poison, I'd just wasted an expensive dessert. Either way, I wasn't taking any chances. When I returned to the living room with a bottle of Benadryl, the scene had deteriorated further. Patricia was now unconscious but breathing, and 3 more guests were openly struggling. Marcus had positioned himself as the crisis coordinator, directing people to call their own doctors, suggesting they might all have food poisoning from the catering. Food poisoning. Another perfect cover story. Here's the Benadryl, I said, handing him the bottle. As he took it, I noticed his hands were completely steady. No trembling, no signs of stress. The man was ice cold under pressure. Thank you, darling. He administered the medication to Patricia, then looked up at the gathered crowd. I think we should probably end the party early. Patricia needs medical attention, and some of the rest of you aren't looking well either. Food poisoning can spread quickly. The guests needed no encouragement. Within minutes, people were gathering their things and heading for the door. Some supporting others who were struggling with dizziness or nausea. I watched them go with growing dread, knowing that some of them might not make it home alive if the poison was as potent as Helena suspected. Marcus walked David Chen to the door, his arm around the man's shoulders in a gesture of support. Take care of yourself, he said warmly. Call if you need anything. Such a caring friend, such a devoted husband, such a perfect psychopath. As the last guest departed, Marcus closed the front door and turned to face me. We were alone now, just the two of us and Patricia's unconscious form on our Persian rug. The ambulance would arrive soon, but not soon enough to save me if Marcus decided to escalate his timeline. "Well," he said, his mask finally slipping. "That was unexpected." I set my empty cake plate on the side table, buying time. "Poor Patricia. I hope she'll be okay." "I'm sure she will be." His tone was conversational, but there was something predatory in the way he moved closer to me. "Though I have to say, I'm disappointed you didn't eat your cake. After all the trouble I went to, making sure it was exactly right." The admission hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting it. Hearing him casually acknowledge his murder attempt made it real in a way that all of Helena's warnings hadn't quite managed. "I was saving it," I said, keeping my voice level. "You know how I like to savor special desserts, do you?" Marcus tilted his head, studying me like a specimen under a microscope. "You know, Sophie, in 3 years of marriage, I don't think I've ever seen you savor anything. You're always so controlled, so careful. It's one of the things that attracted me to you, actually." He was circling me now, and I realized with crystal clarity that the caring husband persona was gone entirely. This was Martin Winchester, the man who had killed 3 women for money. The man who thought I would be number 4. "Control is important," I agreed, turning to keep him in sight. "It's amazing what people reveal when they think you're not paying attention." Marcus laughed, a sound without warmth. "Is that what you think you've been doing, paying attention?" He shook his head. "Sophie, darling, you have no idea what you've stumbled into. Don't I?" The words were out before I could stop them, and I saw his eyes sharpen with interest. "Ah," he said softly. "There it is. The real Sophie Chen Whitmore. I was wondering when she would make an appearance." We stood facing each other across our living room, Patricia's labored breathing the only sound between us. Outside, I could hear sirens in the distance, the ambulance, finally arriving. But also, I hoped, Detective Morrison and her backup. "Tell me something, Marcus," I said, using his name deliberately. "Did you really think I was that stupid? That naive little girl you married who didn't understand finances or legal documents or insurance policies?" His smile was genuinely amused now. "You want to know the truth? At first, yes. You were perfect, young, wealthy, isolated after your parents' deaths, trusting, easy to manipulate." He paused. "But you know what I realized about 6 months ago? You were never that naive. You were studying me just as carefully as I was controlling you." The sirens were getting closer. Marcus heard them too. His head tilted slightly toward the sound, but his eyes never left mine. "The private investigator was a nice touch," he continued conversationally. "Robert Martinez, former police detective, specializes in financial crimes. Did you really think I wouldn't notice someone poking around my business dealings?" My blood ran cold. If he knew about Martinez, what else did he know? "Oh, don't look so worried," Marcus said. "I've known about your little divorce plans for months. The evidence you've been gathering, the secret bank account you opened, even the safe deposit box where you've been storing documents." He stepped closer. "Did you really think you were the first wife to try to outsmart me?" The admission that there had been others, that Helena was right about his previous murders, sent ice through my veins. But it also sparked something else. Rage. Pure, clean anger at this man who had stolen 3 lives and thought he could steal mine too. "The difference between me and your other wives," I said quietly, "is that I have Helena." For the first time, since his mask had dropped, Marcus looked genuinely surprised. "Your aunt? The financial advisor? What does she have to do with anything?" The sirens were very close now. Through the window, I could see flashing lights turning onto our street. "Helena Chen isn't just my aunt," I said, backing toward the door. "She's also a former FBI financial crimes investigator. And she's been building a case against Martin Winchester for the past year." The change in Marcus's expression was immediate and terrifying. The casual predator disappeared, replaced by something far more dangerous. "That's impossible. I checked her background thoroughly before I approached you." "Did you?" I pulled my phone from my clutch, holding it up so he could see the screen. "Because she checked yours too. Martin Winchester, born in Cleveland, Ohio. Real parents died when you were 12. First wife, Jennifer Martinez, died in a car accident after 2 years of marriage. Second wife, Carol Stevens, apparent suicide after 18 months. Third wife, Lisa Chang, allergic reaction to shellfish despite never having seafood allergies before." With each name, Marcus's face grew paler. These weren't details that would appear in a casual background check. These were the fruits of a professional investigation. "And now," I continued, "Sophia Chen Whitmore, intended victim of cyanide. Poisoning disguised as a heart attack at her own birthday party." The front door burst open as I finished speaking, and Detective Morrison stepped through with her weapon drawn, followed by 3 uniformed officers. "Martin Winchester," she announced, "you're under arrest for the murders of Jennifer Martinez, Carol Stevens, and Lisa Chang, as well as the attempted murders of Sophia Whitmore and 8 other individuals." Marcus raised his hand slowly, but his eyes never left mine. "Very good, Sophie," he said almost admiringly. "But you have no idea what you've actually won. Do you think killing me is the end of this? Do you think I worked alone?" "Detective..." Morrison was reading him his rights, but his words sent a chill through me. Before I could ask what he meant, the paramedics rushed in to tend to Patricia, and the moment was lost in the chaos of arrest and medical treatment. But as they led Marcus away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one last time. "Check your trust fund, Sophie," he called out. "All of it. And ask yourself, how did I know exactly when your aunt would call you tonight?" The door slammed behind them, leaving me alone in my living room with the remnants of my birthday party and the growing certainty that this was far from over. Detective Morrison approached me as the paramedics wheeled Patricia out on a stretcher. "Mrs. Whitmore, we need to get you to the hospital for observation, if you ingested any of that cake." "I didn't," I assured her, showing her the prescription bottle with the cake sample. "But, Detective, what did he mean about my trust fund? And how could he have known when Helena would call?" Morrison's expression was grim. "We'll need to go over everything with your aunt. But, Mrs. Whitmore, Martin Winchester is part of something bigger than just a serial killer targeting wealthy women. We think he's been working with a network of people, lawyers, financial advisors, maybe even law enforcement, who help identify targets and cover up the murders." The implications hit me like a physical blow. If Marcus was part of a larger conspiracy, then Helena's investigation might have put both of us in danger from people we didn't even know existed. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Morrison continued, "and we need to find out exactly what your aunt discovered and who else might be involved." As we walked toward her unmarked car, I looked back at the house that had been my prison for 3 years. Tomorrow, the crime scene investigators would tear it apart looking for evidence. They would find the secret cameras I'd installed to monitor Marcus, the hidden microphones that had recorded his phone calls, the carefully documented evidence of his financial crimes. But they would also find something else, the realization that I hadn't just been planning to divorce Marcus Whitmore. I'd been planning to destroy him completely, just as he'd destroyed his previous wives. The only difference was, my plan had been legal. His plan had been murder. And now, it seemed, we were both part of something much larger and more dangerous than either of us had imagined. The safe house was a nondescript ranch home in a subdivision 40 minutes outside the city, the kind of place where neighbors minded their own business, and federal agents could blend in as insurance adjusters or traveling salesmen. Detective Morrison had driven me there in silence after 3 hours at the hospital, confirming I hadn't ingested any poison, while crime scene technicians swarmed my home, and federal agents began the delicate process of unraveling Martin Winchester's network. Helena was waiting in the living room when we arrived at 2 a.m., her silver hair pulled back in the severe bun she wore when conducting serious business. She looked exactly as she had when I was 16, and she'd sat me down to explain the realities of my inheritance. Sharp, uncompromising, and absolutely furious. Sophie. She rose from the beige sofa, her eyes scanning me for injuries. Are you hurt? I'm fine. I sank into the chair across from her, suddenly exhausted. But Patricia Chen is in critical condition, and 7 other people are hospitalized. Marcus, Martin, whoever he is, he nearly killed them just to create cover for murdering me. Helena's jaw tightened. It's worse than we thought. Much worse. Agent. Sarah Blackwood, the FBI financial crimes specialist who'd been working with Helena, entered from the kitchen with 3 cups of coffee. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with auburn hair and the kind of intense focus that suggested she'd been living on caffeine and determination for weeks. Mrs. Whitmore, she said, settling into a chair with her laptop. We need to go through everything. Your marriage to Martin, the financial arrangements, any conversations or behaviors that seemed unusual, no matter how minor they might seem. I looked between Helena and Agent Blackwood. Before we do that, I need to understand something. Martin, said he knew exactly when Helena would call me tonight. How is that possible? Helena and Blackwood exchanged a look that made my stomach clench. Because, Helena said carefully, someone in my office has been feeding information to Martin's network. Someone with access to my investigation files, my phone records, and my travel schedule. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Your office has been compromised? For at least 6 months, Blackwood confirmed. We think whoever it is has been monitoring Helena's investigation into Martin Winchester and reporting back to his handlers. They knew she was getting close, knew she'd discovered the connection between his previous wives' deaths, and they knew she was planning to warn you tonight. I stared at them. So they accelerated his timeline. Instead of waiting for a more natural-seeming opportunity to kill me, they pushed him to do it at the party, in front of witnesses, because they knew Helena was about to blow their whole operation. Exactly. Helena pulled out a thick folder. Sophie, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. Martin Winchester isn't just a serial killer who targets wealthy women. He's part of an organized network that includes lawyers, financial advisors, insurance agents, and law enforcement officials. They identify wealthy targets, usually women who've inherited money, then they place operatives like Martin into their lives. Agent Blackwood opened her laptop. The pattern is always the same. Marriage within 6 to 12 months, gradual financial control, isolation from support networks, and then death disguised as accident, suicide, or natural causes. The insurance payouts and inherited assets are split among network members. I thought about my whirlwind romance with Marcus, how he'd swept me off my feet at that charity gala, how quickly everything had moved. How many women? That we know of. 17, spanning 8 states over the past 12 years. Helena's voice was grim. But we think there are more, many more. The number hit me like a physical blow. 17 women who'd trusted the wrong man, who'd thought they'd found love when they'd actually found predators. And you think someone in your office is helping them identify targets? We know they are, Blackwood said. The question is who, and how deep this goes. Helena's firm handles trust funds and estate planning for some of the wealthiest families in the region. If someone there is providing client information to this network, she didn't need to finish. The implications were staggering. Dozens, maybe hundreds of potential targets, all their financial information and personal details available to a criminal organization that specialized in murder for profit. There's something else, Helena said, her expression darkening further. Sophie, I need you to look at these financial records. She spread out a series of documents across the coffee table. These are from your trust fund, going back 5 years. I leaned forward, studying the papers. At first glance, everything looked normal. The same quarterly statements I'd been receiving, showing steady growth and conservative investments. But Helena was pointing to specific line items, transactions I'd never seen before. Management fees, she said, her finger tracing a series of entries. Except these fees are going to companies that don't exist. Shell corporations that were set up specifically to siphon money from your trust. I found my voice. How much? Over the past 5 years, nearly $2 million. The room spun slightly. $2 million, stolen from my parents' legacy, from the money they'd set aside to ensure I would always be secure. But you manage my trust fund. How is this possible? Helena's face was ashen. Because someone with access to my systems has been authorizing these transactions using forged documents with my signature. Sophie, they've been stealing from you since before you even met Martin Winchester. The pieces were clicking together, in a way that made me feel sick. They were grooming me. They stole from my trust fund to make me a more attractive target. Then they sent Martin to marry me and finish the job. That's what we think. Yes. Agent Blackwood pulled up a file on her laptop. But here's what's interesting. The theft from your trust fund was actually relatively small scale compared to what they could have taken. We think they were being careful not to draw attention, taking just enough to weaken your financial position without triggering a full audit. Until I hired a private investigator and started asking questions, I realized. Then they decided it was time to cut their losses and have Martin kill me. Exactly. But Sophie, there's something else you need to know. Helena pulled out another document. The life insurance policy Martin took out on you? The beneficiary isn't Martin Winchester. I stared at the paper. What do you mean? The primary beneficiary is listed as MW Holdings, LLC. It's another shell corporation, but this one traces back to a law firm in Chicago. Brennan Associates. They specialize in estate planning and trust management. My blood ran cold. They're lawyers? Lawyers who have been very busy, Blackwood said. We've identified at least 6 other suspicious deaths where the victims' assets ended up flowing through Brennan Associates. All young women, all wealthy, all married to men who turned out to have false identities. I thought about Patricia Chen, unconscious in a hospital bed because she'd attended my birthday party. About the other guests who were fighting for their lives because they'd eaten cake meant to kill me. About 17 other women who hadn't been as lucky as I was. What do we do now? I asked. Now, Helena said, we set a trap. But Sophie, what I'm about to propose is dangerous. If we're right about how deep this network goes, they're going to be desperate to tie up loose ends. Martin Winchester is in custody, but he's not talking. His arrest has probably sent the entire network into damage control mode. Agent Blackwood nodded. They'll want to eliminate anyone who can expose them. That means you, Helena, and possibly me. But it also means they might make mistakes if we can pressure them enough. What kind of trap? I asked, though I was already beginning to understand. We leak information that suggests you're planning to come forward publicly about the network, Helena explained. A tell-all interview maybe, or a press conference where you'll name names and expose their operation. It has to seem credible enough that they'll take action to stop you. You want to use me as bait. I want to give you the chance to finish what we started, Helena corrected. Sophie, these people killed 17 women and tried to kill you. They're still out there, still operating, still targeting innocent people. If we can draw them out, force them to make a move against you, we might be able to catch enough of them to shut down the entire network. I looked at the financial records, spread across the table, thinking about the money stolen from my parents' legacy, about Martin's cold calculation as he'd tried to feed me poison, about the guests who were now fighting for their lives in hospital beds. There's something you both need to know, I said finally. I didn't just hire a private investigator to look into Marcus's finances. For the past 18 months, I've been recording everything. Phone calls, arguments, conversations with his colleagues. I installed cameras in our house, audio equipment in his office. I documented every instance of financial abuse, every forged signature, every lie he told about our assets. Helena sat back in her chair. How much do you have? Hundreds of hours of recordings, thousands of documents, financial records, email printouts, photographs of documents he thought I'd never see. I met her eyes. I wasn't just planning to divorce Martin Winchester. I was planning to destroy him completely, to make sure he never hurt anyone else. Jesus, Sophie, Agent Blackwood breathed. Do you realize what this means? If your recordings captured Martin talking to his handlers, discussing the network, mentioning other targets, we might have the evidence we need to bring down the entire organization. I finished. The recordings are stored in multiple locations, encrypted files in cloud storage, physical copies in 3 different safe deposit boxes, and backup drives hidden in places Martin never knew about. The room fell silent as they absorbed this information. But there's a problem, I continued. Martin knew I was recording him, at least partially. He made that clear tonight. If he knew, then his handlers probably know too, which means they know. I have evidence that could destroy all of them. Helena's expression was grim. Which makes you an even bigger threat than we thought. Sophie, if they know you have recordings that could expose the entire network, they'll do anything to get them back, Agent Blackwood finished. And they'll kill you to make sure you can't use them. I stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the suburban street was quiet and peaceful. The kind of place where normal people lived normal lives without worrying about criminal conspiracies or poisoned birthday cakes. But I wasn't a normal person anymore. I was someone who had married a serial killer who had spent 18 months planning legal revenge while he planned my murder, who now held evidence that could topple an entire network of predators. Then we don't give them the chance, I said, turning back to face them. Helena, you said we need to set a trap. Here's what we're going to do. I walked back to the coffee table, gathering the financial documents into a neat stack. Tomorrow, I'm going to call a press conference. I'm going to announce that I'm releasing my deceased husband's private recordings and financial records to the media and to law enforcement. I'm going to name Brennan, associates specifically, and I'm going to give them exactly 24 hours to come forward and cooperate before I release everything publicly. Sophie, that's incredibly dangerous, Helena protested. If I do that, they'll have to act quickly and decisively. They won't have time to plan carefully or cover their tracks. They'll make mistakes. I met her concerned gaze. And we'll be ready for them. Agent Blackwood was already taking notes. What do you need from us? I need you to coordinate with Detective Morrison and make sure Martin's arrest doesn't leak to the media before I make my announcement. I need surveillance on Brennan, associates, and anyone else Helena's investigation has identified as suspicious. And I need you to be ready to move fast when they take the bait. Helena shook her head. Sophie, you're talking about painting a target on your back and then standing in the middle of Times Square. These people have killed 17 women. They won't hesitate to kill you, too. They've already tried to kill me, I pointed out. The difference is, now we know they're coming, and we know why. That gives us an advantage we didn't have before. I picked up one of the financial documents, studying Martin's forged signature next to mine on a trust fund disbursement. Besides, Helena, you taught me something important when I was 16 and scared about managing my inheritance. You told me that knowledge is power, but only if you're brave enough to use it. Agent Blackwood closed her laptop. If we're going to do this, we need to move fast. Every hour we wait gives them more time to clean up evidence and disappear. Then we don't wait, I said. We set up the press conference for tomorrow afternoon. That gives them less than 18 hours to react, which should force them to make desperate choices. Helena stood up, her expression shifting from concern to determination. All right. But Sophie, if we're doing this, we do it right. Full surveillance, backup plans, and enough federal agents to handle anything they throw at us. Agreed. I looked between them. But understand something. This isn't just about bringing them to justice anymore. This is about making sure no other woman goes through what I went through, what Martin's previous victims went through. This network has been operating for 12 years. It's time to shut it down permanently. As we began planning the press conference, that would either destroy Martin Winchester's criminal network or get me killed, I thought about the woman I'd been 24 hours ago. The quiet, controlled wife who let her husband take credit for her ideas, who pretended to be financially naive while secretly gathering evidence of his crimes. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone harder and more dangerous. Someone who had stared down a serial killer at her own birthday party and lived to tell about it. Someone who was about to declare war on an entire criminal organization. The question was whether I was strong enough to win that war, or whether I was about to become victim number 18 in a pattern of murder that stretched back 12 years. By tomorrow evening, we would all know the answer. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the downtown Marriott, but by noon, the trap was already working. Agent Blackwood monitored the communications intercepts from her command post in the hotel's security office while I sat in the green room, watching news vans gather in the parking lot through bulletproof glass. "They're panicking," Blackwood reported through my earpiece. "We've intercepted 17 phone calls between Chicago and various points across the country in the past 6 hours. The network is definitely activated." Helena sat beside me, reviewing the edited recordings we'd prepared for release. After 18 months of secretly documenting Martin's crimes, I'd had enough evidence to fill several hard drives. But for today's purposes, we'd selected the most damning conversations. The ones where Martin discussed previous wives with someone he called the coordinator. The ones where he detailed the insurance policies and asset transfers. And most importantly, the one where he explicitly mentioned Brennan, associates as the firm handling the estate transitions. "Patricia Chen's condition has stabilized," Helena reported, checking her phone. "She's conscious and asking about the party. The doctors think she'll make a full recovery." Relief flooded through me. Patricia had been the most severely affected. Victim from the birthday party, and knowing she would survive lifted a weight I'd been carrying since watching her collapse on my living room floor. The others? All stable. David from Marcus's firm is already asking when he can go back to work. Tommy Rodriguez wants to know if he can sue Martin for attempted murder. Helena's expression grew grim. They were lucky. The dosage was calculated for your body weight and metabolism. If Martin had adjusted it for Patricia's smaller frame, she didn't need to finish. We both understood how close we'd come to multiple fatalities at my birthday party. Detective Morrison entered the green room, her expression tense. "We have movement at Brennan Associates. 3 men in suits left the Chicago office 20 minutes ago. Private jet filed a flight plan to our airport, scheduled to land at 1:30. "They're coming here?" I asked. "Looks like it. Which means either they're planning to silence you before the press conference, or they're going to try to discredit you publicly. Either way, we'll be ready." Agent Blackwood's voice crackled through the earpiece. "We've also identified the leak in Helena's office. Financial advisor named David Kim. He's been accessing client files and forwarding information to an encrypted email account that traces back to the network. We have agents moving to arrest him now." I thought about David Kim, a quiet man in his 40s who'd worked with Helena for 8 years. Someone she'd trusted with her clients' most sensitive financial information. Someone who'd been selling that trust to murderers for profit. "How many clients?" I asked. Helena was already checking her secure tablet. He had access to approximately 300 high-net-worth accounts, all of them potentially compromised. The scope was staggering. 300 wealthy individuals, many of them young women who'd inherited money, all of them now potential targets for Martin's network. The press conference wasn't just about getting justice for 17 murdered women, it was about protecting hundreds more. At 1:45 p.m., I walked into the hotel's main conference room. The space was packed with reporters, cameras, and federal agents posing as hotel staff. The 3 men from Chicago sat in the back row, their expensive suits and cold expressions, marking them as clearly as if they'd worn name tags. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a black Armani suit that suggested both mourning and authority, minimal jewelry except for my wedding ring, which I planned to remove during the conference as a symbol of breaking free from Martin's control. My appearance needed to convey vulnerability and strength simultaneously, the grieving widow who was also a formidable opponent. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system. "5 days ago, I celebrated my 28th birthday with friends and family. My husband of 3 years, Marcus Whitmore, organized a beautiful party with an elaborate cake. 23 people attended that celebration." I paused, letting the cameras capture my composed expression. What I didn't know was that my husband had laced that cake with cyanide. What I didn't know was that Marcus Whitmore wasn't his real name. And what I didn't know was that I had married a serial killer who had already murdered 3 previous wives. The room erupted in whispers and camera clicks. In the back row, the 3 men from Chicago remained perfectly still, their faces betraying nothing. "My husband's real name is Martin Winchester," I continued, "and for the past 18 months, I have been secretly recording his conversations and documenting his crimes. What I discovered goes far beyond one man's murderous greed. Martin Winchester is part of an organized network that has systematically targeted and murdered at least 17 wealthy women across 8 states over the past 12 years. I nodded to the technician, and the first audio recording began to play through the room's speakers. Martin's voice, captured 6 months ago during a phone call he'd thought was private, discussing the Chen situation with someone he called the coordinator. "The trust fund is larger than we initially calculated," Martin's recorded voice said. "But the timeline needs to be accelerated. Helena Chen is asking too many questions about the management fees." The coordinator's voice responded, "Then we move to the final phase. Make it look accidental and make sure the insurance claim is processed quickly. Brennan can handle the estate paperwork." The room fell silent except for the sound of camera shutters. In the back row, one of the Chicago men was speaking quietly into his phone. "Brennan Associates," I announced, "is a law firm based in Chicago that specializes in processing the estates of Martin Winchester's victims. They have handled the fraudulent transfer of millions of dollars in assets from murdered women to members of this criminal network." I played 3 more recordings, each one more damning than the last. Martin discussing the insurance policies taken out on his wives. Martin receiving instructions on how to isolate his targets from their support systems. Martin being coached on the timing and methods for each murder. With each recording, I watched the 3 men from Chicago grow more agitated. Finally, one of them stood up. "Excuse me?" he called out, his voice carrying a slight Chicago accent. "I'm Robert Brennan, senior partner at Brennan Associates. These allegations are completely false, and these recordings have obviously been fabricated." The room turned toward him, cameras swinging to capture his interruption. But I had been expecting this moment. "Mr. Brennan," I said calmly, "thank you for joining us today. Your presence here suggests that you were monitoring law enforcement communications about Martin Winchester's arrest, which raises interesting questions about your relationship with my husband." Brennan's face flushed. "I have no relationship with your husband. I've never heard the name Martin Winchester in my life." I smiled, reaching for the folder of documents Helena had prepared. "That's interesting, because according to these insurance records, Brennan Associates was listed as the legal representative for MW Holdings, LLC, the primary beneficiary of my life insurance policy. A policy that Martin took out without my knowledge 6 months ago." Agent Blackwood's voice whispered in my earpiece. "We have him. Keep going." Furthermore, I continued, pulling out financial records. Bank transfers show that Brennan Associates has received payments totaling over $8 million from shell corporations connected to the estates of Martin's previous victims. Jennifer Martinez, Carol Stevens, Lisa Chang. All 3 women's assets were processed through your firm after their deaths. Brennan was shaking his head. but his companions were already moving toward the exit. That was when Detective Morrison and her team moved in, blocking the doors and identifying themselves as law enforcement. "Robert Brennan, Thomas Mitchell, and James Harrison," Morrison announced. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, and racketeering." The room exploded into chaos as reporters shouted questions and cameras captured the arrests. But I remained at the podium, watching with satisfaction as the 3 men who had profited from 17 women's deaths were led away in handcuffs. "The network that killed 17 women has been dismantled," I announced over the noise. But the story doesn't end with these arrests. It ends with a promise that no other woman will suffer what Martin Winchester's victims suffered. That no other family will lose a daughter, a sister, a wife to these predators. I reached up and slowly removed my wedding ring, setting it on the podium. "My name is Sophia Chen, and I am no longer Martin Winchester's wife. I am the woman who brought down the network that tried to kill me, and I am the voice for 17 women who can no longer speak for themselves." The press conference concluded with thunderous applause and a barrage of questions, but I had said everything I needed to say. As I left the podium, Helena met me at the side entrance. "It's over?" I asked. "The arrests are just the beginning," she replied. "But Sophie, you did it. The entire network is going to come down because of what you did today." 6 months later, I stood in the same downtown hotel, this time for a very different kind of press conference. Martin Winchester had been sentenced to death for the murders of 4 women and the attempted murders of 8 more. Robert Brennan and his associates had received life sentences without parole. David Kim, the financial advisor who had betrayed Helena's clients, had been sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. More importantly, the investigation sparked by my recordings had led to the arrest of 43 individuals across 12 states, effectively dismantling what federal prosecutors called the largest organized murder-for-profit scheme in American history. The victims' families had established a foundation in memory of the 17 women who died. I served as its president, using my inheritance, what remained of it after the network's theft was recovered, to fund programs that helped law enforcement identify and investigate suspicious deaths among wealthy women. Patricia Chen, who had survived the poisoning at my birthday party, had become one of my closest allies in this work. She'd left her job at Martin's law firm and joined our foundation as its chief investigator, using her legal background to help identify patterns that might indicate predatory behavior. "Any regrets?" Helena asked as we watched the latest group of law enforcement officers receive training on recognizing the signs of inheritance-based targeting. I thought about the question seriously. The past year had been filled with testimony, trials, and the constant weight of knowing that my decision to fight back had prevented dozens of other women from becoming victims. "Only one," I said finally. "I regret that it took me so long to realize what Martin really was. If I'd acted sooner, if I'd trusted my instincts instead of his manipulation." "You'd be dead," Helena interrupted firmly. "Sophie, Martin Winchester was a professional predator with 12 years of experience manipulating and killing women. The fact that you not only survived, but managed to gather enough evidence to destroy his entire network? That's not something to regret. That's something to be proud of." She was right. The woman who had meekly accepted her husband's condescension at dinner parties was gone, replaced by someone who understood that knowledge truly was power. But only when you had the courage to use it. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morrison. Another case in Oregon showing the pattern. Sending files for review. I smiled, gathering my things. The network was dismantled, but there were always more predators, more women at risk, more work to be done. The difference was that now, instead of being a target, I was a hunter, and I was very, very good at it. As I left the hotel, I reflected on the text that had started it all. "Don't eat the cake." 4 simple words from Helena that had saved my life and led to the destruction of a criminal empire. Sometimes the most important messages come at exactly the right moment, from exactly the right person, in exactly the right words. Sometimes salvation arrives disguised as a warning about dessert. And sometimes the best revenge isn't just surviving. It's making sure no one else has to go through what you survived. The cake had been poisoned, but I had been stronger, and that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.